Come on, Jay. Can't you turn up the heat?
If I do, I'll burn through every bit of...
Oh my god. So fucking cringe. Everything in English is so fucking cringe. Teen killer realizes he's going to prison. 1 hour. No. The interrogation of a manipulative police officer. No. What happened was the ultimate act of betrayal. True crime documentary Jasmine Pace. Or Lloyd learns domain expansion. What the fuck? Did Zenless Zone Zero fix anniversary rewards? I highly doubt. Ah, fuck, de acum, ții minte? E Kurumi Battle Track. Very good. Yeah, pretty good song. Oh, that's I like this guy. I like this guy. Just Thought Lounge. I'm gonna subscribe to him. Pretty good detective
September
stuff.
2010, when a distraught boyfriend placed a panicked call to 911. He had just heard gunshots from inside the house. Breaking down the locked door and forcing his way to his girlfriend's side, where she lies shot on the floor, he pleaded with emergency responders to please hurry.
Get someone here now.
He was a deputy with the local sheriff's office. He was one of them.
Deputy Banks with the St. Charles County Sheriff's Office. I work with you.
Your friends are on their way.
Hey there.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. At JTL, we deliver serious coverage of the cases that really make you think. If that sounds like your type of true crime, then you've come to the right place. Today's case is a complicated one, and it doesn't follow any of the regular patterns that we're accustomed to seeing. In the years since this horrific incident took place, the case has involved one state attorney, multiple special prosecutors, internal investigations, 4 medical examiners, and many theories of what actually took place.
Nu știu ce sunt așa plasticoase astea, nu găsești din bumbac ceva ca lumea. Doamne ferește. No, măcar chiloții sunt relativ ok.
Before we dive into the details and the controversy
surrounding this case, I'd like to take a moment to offer a thank you to the sponsor of this video. When I partnered with MyHeritage, they kindly sent me one of their DNA kits to discover my origins and to maybe even find relatives living all over the world that I didn't know I had. Taking the test was very straightforward. The results will give me an ethnicity estimate, a percentage breakdown of my origins across 42 supported ethnicities and over 2,000 geographic regions. After I sent off my test for analysis, I took advantage of the MyHeritage photo features to enhance and colorize some of my old family photos. The color really brings it to life. Alright, I've given it some time and now my DNA results have come into my email. I know that all of my grandparents were born in Scotland, so I am anticipating at least some of my DNA linking me to the British Isles, where I now live. But beyond that, I have no idea what to expect. Let's take a look. 67% Scottish, okay. You know? 22% English. Okay, that is not shocking. 8% East European. And what do I round off with? 3% Baltic. Okay, that is a very white person. So that was really fun. Also really informative.
Thanks for being here with me for the reveal. If
Nu
you're
ne murim, mă.
interested in exploring your ancestry, My Heritage has a promotion running right now.
Este mai bun decât Diablo 1, 2, 3 și 4 la un loc.
Coupon code shown here.
Pentru vremea asta.
Description of this video.
Că de apărea asta în 93, te pușcai în cap.
Let's get back to the video. In September 2010, 24-year-old Michelle O'Connell lived with her boyfriend Jeremy Banks in St. Augustine, Florida. The historic city sits on the Atlantic coast in the northeastern region of the state.
Da.
It's part of St. Johns County. The county sheriff is one of the region's largest employers. This is where Michelle's brother Scott O'Connell, working as a sheriff's deputy, met fellow deputy Jeremy Banks. A year after introducing Deputy Banks to Michelle, the couple were living together in Jeremy's house, along with Michelle's 4-year-old daughter, Alexis. Michelle is very athletic and fun-loving. Back in 2010, Michelle was a young mother known to be outgoing and adventurous. This side of Michelle's personality was balanced by her unfailing dedication to her daughter. For years, Michelle worked 2 or even 3 jobs at a time to make ends meet and to properly support little Alexis, who was the center of her world. On September 2nd that year, Michelle had planned with boyfriend Jeremy and her brother Scott to attend a concert at the St. Augustine Amphitheater. She dropped Lexi at her sister's, and the group spent the evening having fun and enjoying the music. Or at least most of the group did. Jeremy was in a foul mood, which would only worsen throughout the night. Shortly after the couple returned to the house after the concert, things took an extreme turn. It was 11:20 p.m.
My God, that high kick, what the fuck?
And 911.
Please get them into my house. Please, please, my girlfriend. Sir, listen, hang on. Listen, let me tell you the truth. I'm Deputy Banks with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. I work with y'all. Get someone here now.
When Deputy Jeremy Banks' colleagues from the Sheriff's Department responded to his house, they found the door open. Through the kitchen and into the adjoining room, Michelle was found on the floor. To her left was the gun, Jeremy's service weapon. It had been removed from its retention holster and the tactical light was left on.
No one around.
One bullet had struck on the floor, just below Michelle's right arm. 2 shell casings were located in the corner of the room. Photos of Michelle in the home were taken rapidly to document the state of the scene prior to paramedics rushing in and trying everything they could to assist Michelle. It was, however, too late for medical intervention. Michelle was declared dead at the scene. The first responders into the house reported smelling alcohol on Jeremy's breath. In these first moments, colleagues recalled that the boyfriend did not appear sad to them. Jeremy was Michelle's purse was quickly spotted on the kitchen counter. In an effort to formally ID her, officers checked through her bag. Inside, they spotted 2 prescription pill bottles, both for antidepressants, and both in the name of Jeremy Banks. Some of these pills were also found in the front pocket of Michelle's jeans. For several hours, the deputy remained at the house speaking with colleagues. His first interview took place in the back of one of the cruisers while still at the scene.
This is Detective Hines. It is officially September 3rd at 1:23 in the morning. In the my motorcycle was in the garage. I was sitting on it. And, I heard it pop, and I knew exactly what it was. And I ran inside and started screaming her name. The door was locked, and I screamed her name again, and I heard it go off again for the second time. I ran into the living room. I grabbed the phone, and I kicked the bedroom door in, and I found her laying where she is. Took her to the sheriff's office.
Jeremy explained that he and Michelle had been arguing earlier that night. She planned to leave him.
Whenever she said, I'll have my stuff out by this weekend, and I said, are we breaking up? She said, yes. Alright. If I raise my voice, she raised her voice to argue. But we got to the house, we were fine.
After a few hours, as word spread, more and more of the sheriff's team, both on and off-duty officers, began arriving at the scene.
Da, nu să mă instalez și eu roadcraft ăla, dar n-am timp acum de el.
Jeremy was telling the truth. The autopsy was performed by the county's medical examiner, Dr. Frederick Hoban. The doctor found that some alcohol but no drugs were found in Michelle's system, in spite of the pills located in her pocket and handbag. Michelle had died from a gunshot to the mouth. Dr. Hoban also identified a small cut and bruise above Michelle's right eyelid. He determined that this injury was made by the ejected shell casing when it discharged from the weapon. He found no indication of defensive wounds.
Some punchy.
Gunshot residue was found on Michelle's hands. A forensically insignificant amount was found on Jeremy's hand as well. This small amount was attributed to him rushing into the room after hearing the second shot. Based on these findings, the doctor supported the conclusion already broadly accepted by law enforcement. Dr. Hoban ruled the death as suicide. Jeremy Banks was brought into the police station for a follow-up interview 12 days following Michelle's death. This discussion did not follow the typical pattern of a police interrogation. At some point prior to this interview, Jeremy had gained access to the sheriff's report on the incident.
When is it morning? 10 AM I think.
Yeah, great room.
In these initial days and weeks, Jeremy Banks seemed to be the only person close to Michelle that believed his story made sense. To the O'Connells, his version of events was ludicrous. It was conceded that in her teenage years, Michelle had battled with both depression and anger issues. However, it had been years without her experiencing a reoccurrence of these issues. Since having Alexis 4 years earlier, Michelle had become a motivated, dedicated, and proud mother. She would not leave her daughter. Michelle had also just received a promotion at the daycare where she worked full-time. The role came with better pay and benefits. She was set to begin the new role that week, and she was excited for the new start. And that was not the only sign that something wasn't quite right with Deputy Jeremy's story. At lunch on the day of her death, Michelle told one of her sisters, Christine, of her plans to break up with Jeremy that evening. This news came as no surprise.
There's always these fucking guys.
Family knew
Some fucking guy.
was treated in her relationship. Christine asked her to skip the concert that night, but Michelle was holding her ground. She had purchased the tickets, so she was going. Text messages exchanged between Michelle and Christine, as well as her brother Scott, foreshadowed that something was coming. But interpretations varied. Beginning at the amphitheater and continuing into the night, Michelle sent texts to her sister seeking promises that her daughter would always be taken care of. "Promise me one thing. Lexi will be happy and always have a good life," she wrote. "That no matter what, Lexi will always be safe and loved." "What's going on? I'm scared," Christine texted. By the end of the concert, Michelle texted her sister, "I'll be there soon." The last text she sent that night was to her brother, "Lexi, never forget." Several weeks after Michelle's death, the O'Connell siblings, Sean, Jennifer, Christine, and Deputy Scott, met with Lieutenant Bradley from the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office for an update on the investigation. They were told that the case was being closed.
Oh, they're fucking dead.
All indications are that she was contemplating suicide based on her text.
I asked the night that Michelle was shot, am I allowed to submit a statement? Because she told me a lot of things about me, and I'm just going to spell it out for everyone here. She came to my house, she said, "I'm moving, I'm scared." I submitted that statement just to testify to what she said. And he said, "No, none of that is, it's all hearsay."
If this was the sheriff's daughter, you must have. You're the head of this agency. Stand up and answer our questions.
So I'm doing the very best I can. And I feel like this is sheriff's office has a bill. And I can feel at this table that there's a massive conspiracy theory. And there's not one, guys.
Can I interject?
That Jeremy is the murderer of Michelle. Okay, I keep getting that. I've been getting that over the last several weeks. So what we need to do, guys, is we need to sit down and do this. This is what it is. This is what happened.
In the weeks following, Scott O'Connell was fired from his role as a sheriff deputy. His distress over the lack of action taken in his sister's case had led to angry outbursts at work, so he was dismissed. His mother, Patty, continued to work as a file clerk at the sheriff's office for a time, but described the work environment as unbearable, knowing that her daughter had been murdered and her family's pleas for justice were falling on deaf ears. By 2010, St. Johns County Sheriff David Shore had been elected to his position 3 times. 2 of these times, he ran unopposed. The sheriff was both a popular and powerful figure in the county. Eventually, following roughly 4 months of public pressure, he agreed to have Michelle's case handed over for an independent inquiry. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the FDLE, sent Agent Rusty Rogers to St. Augustine to reinvestigate Michelle's death, and the agent hit the ground running. He set out to fill in the gaps left in the sheriff's investigation. With no witnesses or a suicide note, the family should have been interviewed to determine Michelle's state of mind. Agent Rogers began those interviews.
It felt like to us, as a family, that it was rushed. They had their mind made up. This was suicide, and that the investigation could have went a different way, and that he knew there was things in the past that he had done that she was going to report, and that it was going to come out that this deputy sheriff was not the true person that he was playing to be, and that he was actually a pretty bad person.
From interviewing family and friends, Agent Rogers learned of Michelle's recent promotion, that she had CPR training scheduled in 2 days' time, that she had planned to meet another friend, Mindy, that night, and had even popped out to the garage to retrieve her handbag in order to fix up her makeup. The neighborhood had not been canvassed for witnesses by the sheriff's team. Within 2 weeks of commencing his investigation, Agent Rogers located not just 1, but 2 key witnesses. 2 women, each in their respective homes on nearby streets, overheard an argument taking place in the direction of Jeremy's house on the night of September 2nd. Both witnesses reported clearly hearing cries for help, followed by 2 gunshots.
We heard a woman yell for help, and then we heard a gunshot, and then there was another yell for help, and then another gunshot.
This evidence was considered to be so significant, a potential turning point in the case, that the witnesses were administered polygraph tests from the Secret Service to determine their credibility. They both passed. It was obvious that Jeremy Banks had not been treated like a standard murder suspect. He had not been properly interviewed, nor had he been thoroughly processed. Drops of blood on the inside of the t-shirt that he was wearing that night returned a match to Michelle. It also appeared to be a different t-shirt than the one he wore earlier to the concert. Jeremy offered no explanation as to how this blood could have gotten there, nor was he pressured by the original detectives to offer one. Other DNA evidence was also suspicious. The gun was found to have traces of Michelle's DNA, but it did not contain any traces of Jeremy's, nor any of his fingerprints, despite it being his service weapon and carried by him earlier that day. There was also no blood found on the gun, though spatter was visible in the area surrounding it. Curiously, the pill bottles found in Michelle's purse did not have her DNA on them. Then there was the issue of the second bullet. To recreate a scenario that would explain the crime scene as it was found, Agent Rogers enlisted a veteran crime scene reconstructionist and former police officer, an expert named Jerry Finley. Mr. Finley's final report raised more doubt about the sheriff's conclusions. He questioned whether Michelle O'Connell would even have been capable of removing her boyfriend's service weapon from its retention holster, which is designed to prevent unauthorized persons from accessing the gun. Similarly, the tactical light required 2 movements to activate. Would Michelle have known how to do this? Perhaps more impactful than these speculations, however, were the tests that the expert performed to determine the likely position of the shooter based on the location of the shell pieces. Finley fired the gun 18 times in different positions and concluded that for the shells to end up where they had, in the corner of the room behind and to the left of the body, whoever pulled the trigger had to have been left-handed. The only left-handed person in the house was Jeremy Guns. Finally, in direct contradiction to the conclusion of the medical examiner, Dr. Hoban, Finley found that the cut to Michelle's eye could not have been caused by an ejected casing. He believed that it was a separate injury. Perhaps she had been struck with the gun as part of a struggle. After this new evidence came to light, Dr. Hoban revisited his determination, and he changed his mind. The medical examiner altered his findings from suicide to shot by another. For a time, it looked like a formal homicide investigation may actually take place. As part of Agent Rogers' inquiry, he spoke with the officers who had responded to Jeremy Banks' home on September 2nd. What he learned was that even the responders who seemingly knew that something was wrong with Jeremy's story came to accept it.
First walked into that room, the first thought that went through my mind was, this is not good for Jeremy.
Did you think it went down like Jeremy said it did that night?
I don't think so. I mean, just, I was a little uneasy where I remember seeing the shot in the floor and where the gun was. I was in homicide unit for a few years and it didn't add up, but I didn't do more investigation into this to see why things were like this.
The gun out of a secured holster and shot herself. Yes.
Did I explain what?
It's a retention holster. Most people don't know how to use them.
Do you ever know him to have an explosive temper?
Oh yes. He's had temper issues. You know, his temper was uncontrolled. He'd drink and he'd just get pissed. You know, he'd walk around.
Any suspicions that it was anything other than suicide? I think that's what we were all kind of discussing, but just making sure that...
Opa, wait.
Following Agent Rogers' report, the FDLE handed over the results to the state's attorney. The prosecutor recused his office from the case, citing its close relationship to the sheriff's team. At this stage, a special prosecutor was called in from a nearby district to review the FDLE's evidence. This prosecutor, Brad King, relied on the reports of 3 medical examiners. All had concluded it was a suicide. 2 additional experts had been called in to consult after Dr. Hoban's assessment. Seeing himself in the minority opinion, Dr. Hoban then again changed his mind. It was a suicide after all. All 3 doctors stated that the key to this determination was that no defensive wounds were found on Michelle. There's one obvious flaw in the examiner's logic, and that was the bruise and cut on Michelle's eyelid. For their conclusions to be correct, it had to be caused by the shot itself. The new chief medical examiner, Dr. Predrag Bulik, was one of the 3 doctors who offered their opinion to the special prosecutor.
Yes, you can go in here
and
easily.
He had a theory. Michelle held the gun with her left non-dominant hand and upside down.
Down in her mouth, upside down, and you find that hard to believe.
Not just that, it would have been with her left hand. The shooter was apparently left-handed. Everyone agrees on that. The only left-handed person in the house that night was Jeremy Banks. Michelle was...
Dr. Bulik posited that when the gun fired, the tactical light caused the mark on the upper part of Michelle's eyelid. In order for the shot to have caused the impact, the gun needed to recoil in a forward motion, which experts stated was a physical impossibility. Guns recoil backwards. The upside-down gun theory was endorsed by the special prosecutor, who concluded that there was not enough evidence to recategorize Michelle's death as a homicide. While Brad King conducted his review, Sheriff Shore was busy muddying the waters even further. Unimpressed with the unfavorable result of Agent Rusty Rogers' inquiry, the sheriff responded with a report of his own. A scathing 152 pages that accused Agent Rogers of manufacturing evidence, poaching witnesses, and lying to obtain search warrants. The sheriff's report forced an internal review of Rogers, who was placed on administrative leave while yet another internal investigation was undertaken. Some of the complaints lodged about the FDLE agent were found to be valid, but hardly the levels of corruption that the sheriff had suggested. Rogers had searched Jeremy Banks' cell phone without a warrant, believing that an existing wiretap on the line and warrant to search the house was sufficient to cover the phone as well. It was not. He also referenced text messages in his report that were not properly documented, such as the one sent from Michelle to her sister just before her death, stating that she was on her way to collect Lexi. Michelle's phone data was never properly collected. Only notes in the case existed to record these exchanges. Agent Rogers was reprimanded and given additional supervision.
Agent Rogers was used as a scapegoat to show people if you don't look the other way, you will be punished. You'll lose your job. We'll put you through the ringer.
Over the years, the case attracted the attention of amateur sleuths and independent investigators, as well as professional reporters. The New York Times published an investigative deep dive that had initially sought to uncover how sheriff offices dealt with domestic violence accusations against their own officers. This led them to St. Johns County, and then to the case of Michelle O'Connell. One independent investigator had made multiple record requests of the sheriff's office and was taking a fresh look at the evidence.
Love that slap. Slap with the kick.
38-year-old Ellie Washtalk, whose birth name was Craig, had been conducting private research on the case for over a year and was in regular contact with Patty O'Connell. On the 31st of January 2019, at roughly 7:30 a.m., Ellie's teenage son returned to their condo from a neighboring unit and made a horrifying discovery.
What's going on there? Got shot. Okay, what makes you think that?
He's currently running.
Did you see a weapon there, sir?
Yes, there is a weapon.
It was his own gun?
Yes.
Elliot sent his son to spend the night at another unit in the building because apparently he thought something terrible was going to happen. It's unclear what exactly prompted this intuition, but the next morning, he was dead from a gunshot to the head.
There's a lot of gunfire. He was shot more than once?
I don't know, but there are shots going through the wall.
Both Patty O'Connell as well as Ellie's father believed that the amateur investigator's murder was connected to his interest in Michelle's case.
If he wasn't looking into that, or if he wasn't involved with that, or whatever, yeah, I think he'd still be alive. That's like I heard it was 71 Chandler in a downstairs apartment 2 floors down because he was afraid of what was going to happen or something was going to happen and he didn't want to get there.
Due to the conflict of interest, the murder investigation of Ellie Washtalk was handed over to the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. There have been no arrests made, and the authorities have named no suspects. But the police noted that Ellie was likely to have known his attacker because there were no signs of forced entry, and it would have been difficult for a stranger to get past the security gate at the Laterra condominiums, which sits in a gated community. For this reason, and perhaps others that have not been disclosed, Putnam County detectives do not believe that Ellie's death is connected to that of Michelle O'Connell. In a bid to have Michelle's cause of death revised and the case reopened, the O'Connells agreed to have an independent pathologist re-examine her body. Dr. William Anderson undertook this task pro bono. Michelle's remains were exhumed and a second autopsy performed. The results revealed clear evidence missing from Dr. Hoban's report from years earlier. Michelle's jaw had been broken.
That was fractured.
only basically at the second autopsy. So all of the people were making the assumptions this was suicide were unaware of the existence of the fracture damage. And that's a different injury pattern, and it creates a whole different scenario. External trauma due to significant trauma unrelated to the wound itself. And that means that someone else is involved.
At the end of Dr. Anderson's report, the conclusion plainly states, the manner of death should be considered homicide. Justice Scott O'Connell was rehired by the St. John's Sheriff's Office. After approximately 3 years, Scott accepted Sheriff Shore's narrative. He blamed Agent Rusty Rogers for formulating an inaccurate account of his sister's death and convincing the family that she was murdered, when in fact, he now believes that was not the case. The sheriff made the announcement of his return at an employee convention in the summer of 2013. He also chose that platform to celebrate Jeremy Banks, who he viewed as a victim, a deputy who had suffered years of unfounded accusations.
There may be some of
Ridică un perete întreg, fata, numai să aibă cover. Ca în zenele Zone Zero. La bambul ăla.
Jeremy Banks had nothing to do with this case. This guy right here came so damn close to being charged with homicide based on nothing. These two guys did.
In 2019, Jeremy remained a deputy with the county. Through an attorney, he told a media outlet that Michelle's death had ruined his life because neighbors walk up and down the street at 2 at night and will scream at him.
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
The Justice for Michelle O'Connell Facebook page remains active. David Shore served 4 terms as sheriff, a total of 16 years. In early 2023, he became the head of investigations at a sizable law firm with offices across Florida and Texas. After a 3-year probe, Agent Rusty Rogers was cleared of wrongdoing and reinstated as a special agent with the FBI. Alexis O'Connell has grown up with family. The O'Connells continue to hold out hope that justice will be served for Michelle. And that was the strange case of Michelle O'Connell. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
Mult mai vorbăreață asta decât Mystic. Brat.
3 days before Christmas in the Philadelphia suburbs, housewife Ellen Robb was wrapping gifts at her kitchen table. Only a few hours after her husband had left for work, he returned home and found her murdered, still with gifts sitting out. She was on the kitchen floor. A broken window and her husband's extensive alibi led to an obvious conclusion. This was a burglary that had gone wrong. But was there more to this story than meets the eye? Hi everyone, I'm Kevin, and this is Just Thought Lounge. At JTL, we deliver serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. If that sounds like your type of true crime, then you've come to the right place. Today's case takes a look at what happens when a killer tries to outsmart an investigation. And when all is said and done, you can be the judge of how well that worked out. Let's take a look.
Come on, man, I hit you with a bazooka, you die, man.
Ellen Gregory was born in Syracuse, New York, but grew up in Rosemont, in Pennsylvania. In her youth, Ellen was an extroverted and fun-loving student, friend, and sister. After studying retail and design at college, she launched a career as a retail manager. In the late 1980s, the vivacious and youthful Ellen met a man a few years her senior, who seemed in many ways to be her exact opposite in temperament and personality. Introverted and academic Raphael Robb was already a well-established economist. A native of Israel and very well-traveled, Raphael earned his doctorate at the University of California in the late 70s. His specialization was game theory, the study of decision-making. Usually, his expertise was applied to predicting consumer decisions. The academic worked as a consultant to some of the world's largest corporations and even on occasion, national governments. It was his job to assess every detail of a situation, predict how others would respond, and create strategies to win in any circumstance. Raphael held a tenured position as a professor in economics and game theory at the University of Pennsylvania. In 1990, the introverted professor proposed to the outgoing and energetic Ellen Gregory, and she said yes. It was a second marriage for Raphael, Ellen's first. After a few years, the marriage was off to a rocky start. Ellen, nonetheless, became pregnant. The couple's daughter, Olivia, was the center of their world. As Christmas time approached in the winter of 2006, she was 12 years old. On the 22nd of December, Raphael placed a call to the Marion Police Department. It was just before 2 p.m. He had arrived home to find Ellen, his wife of 16 years, dead on the kitchen floor. Bizarrely, given the circumstances, but typical for Raphael, he calmly explained to the officer that he had arrived home and found his wife murdered on the floor. Officer Markland of the Marion Police asked if she was killed and how he could be certain. Raphael's response was definitive. "I know," he said. "Her head is cracked." He confirmed that no one else was there, but mentioned a broken window that he had spotted in the back of the house. Someone must have broken in. When officers arrived at the house on Forest Road, there was a lot to take in. The crime scene was horrific. It was the Montgomery County Detective Bureau that handled homicides for the region. There were not a lot of these types of violent crimes to investigate in the high-end suburb of Upper Marion. However, the veteran detectives from the county had mostly spent their careers elsewhere, including Philadelphia and other major cities. Collectively, they had been exposed to and investigated thousands of homicides. The consensus of these experts when they saw the brutal scene was clear. Ellen Robb had been shot, likely with a high-powered rifle or a shotgun to the head. This conclusion was drawn largely from the unsettling amount of damage that had been inflicted on the wife and mother. Christmas wrapping and accessories sitting nearby gave away her activity in the moments before her death. She was preparing gifts for the holidays. Bloody footprints led from near to Ellen in the kitchen out through to the garage, where they abruptly ceased, suggesting the killer's path to exit the house. A side door had glass busted through from the exterior, just as Raphael had noted on his call to the police department. The nature of the lock meant that an intruder could have reached through the broken window and opened the doorknob from the inside to gain access. Then there was the state of the rest of the house. Boxes, piles of them, stacked upon each other, floor to ceiling, with narrow paths cut out to connect one room to the next. The lack of space was stifling, and the number of objects overwhelming. Almost everything appeared to be new purchases. Unopened packages of homeware items, cosmetics, and everything else, mostly purchased from the internet. The extensive search did not turn up any bloody clothing or unloaded weapon, and with the house in this cluttered state, it was difficult to determine if anything was missing. The home did not appear to have been ransacked. There were certainly items in plain view that a burglar could have taken. That nothing had clearly been stolen was not the only oddity in Raphael Robb's claim that a burglar-turned-killer had made his way into the home. Ellen's vehicle, a second-hand Subaru, was parked in the drive. This would have served as a sign to any potential thief that someone was at home. Curiously, directly across the street, there was no car in the drive, and a UPS package left in plain view by the front door, an indication that no one was at home, only one property adjacent. Why choose the Robb house to break into? The broken glass from the door window had shattered across the floor inside the house. It was scattered across the hallway leading into the rest of the house, but it appeared undisturbed. The glass was not crushed underfoot. No one had walked on it to get into the house. Raphael had entered through the garage, and the front door remained unlocked. Raphael Rob's story was suspicious, and his behavior to investigators did not help ease their skepticism. Raphael reportedly calmly explained to investigators how he had last seen his wife that morning before leaving for work at the university. Then, without tears or emotion, he told them about walking into the kitchen to find her dead upon his return. Raphael was first questioned at the Montgomery County Hospital, where he was taken after complaining of anxiety. His clothing was taken, a DNA sample provided, and his hands were tested for gunshot wounds. All of this was done without complaint or reservation. A small speck of blood was noticeable on his right hand. He had approached his wife and touched her face when he first came upon her, he recalled. The professor remained externally calm and collected, and he was extremely cooperative. His initial questioning lasted a full 12 hours, during which time he answered every question posed to him and never requested legal counsel. He refused, however, to take a polygraph test, insisting that due to his anxiety, he would likely fail. By this time, detectives had been informed of Raphael's background, including his expertise in game theory. If he was trying to outsmart them, they were ready. A team was out verifying every aspect of his story and every detail of his alibi in real time. Meanwhile, they asked him to outline exactly where he had been that day up to the moment he found Ellen in the kitchen. After dropping Olivia at school that morning around 8:30, the professor returned home, where Ellen was busy wrapping Christmas gifts. He told detectives that he left at roughly 9:20 to go to a food market where he made a purchase at a fruit stand. From the market, Raphael stopped at a convenience store to purchase a soda. Here he parked only briefly on the side of the street. Onwards to Penn State, he arrived at his office, physically turned in his grades to a colleague, then drove back home, arriving to discover his wife at about 1:45 p.m. His alibi, for the most part, checked out. Fruit was found in a bag in the backseat of his car, ostensibly from the fruit stand at the market, though without any receipt to confirm when it was purchased or where it was from. The owner of the fruit stand did not recall seeing him that morning, though knew Raphael from other visits. He also had a parking ticket from his stop to purchase a soda, and cameras at the store captured him there. However, a walk from the parking lot to his office on campus revealed numerous stands and vending machines en route. Any one of these would have been more convenient than the store to have purchased a soda. His colleague subsequently confirmed that she spoke with him briefly when he turned in his grades. The exchange lasted no more than 2 minutes. Investigators also found that his drive home, which should have been 40 minutes with heavy traffic, must have taken him an hour. He claimed to have spent 40 minutes at the fruit stand, yet he was not recognized by the owner only hours later. Also extremely curious was Raphael's choice to call the local police station telephone directly instead of 911. Was his intention to avoid being reported? He placed the call 20 minutes after arriving home and finding Ellen, though the path he took around the house could not have taken nearly that amount of time. The professor's calculated story was not adding up. While Raphael sat in a marathon interview with investigators, an autopsy was performed on Ellen. The medical examiner had anticipated locating a gunshot wound, but quickly determined that this would not be the case. The defensive wounds on Ellen's arms could not have been caused by a gun. There was no gunshot. Raphael's initial statement to police over the phone that his wife's head was cracked was suspiciously accurate. The first impressions of law enforcement that originally worked the scene, with their cumulative years of experience, hadn't deduced what the economist had known with certainty. Ellen had been killed by multiple blunt force traumas to the head. It was thought that the murder weapon was likely a crowbar or similar object. It had been a heavy object with a sharpened end. They determined that Ellen had been killed between 8:15 and 10:30 a.m., leaving room within Raphael's window of time. This presented the very real possibility
the best hunter class
that the
there is
professor
in
had committed
MMOs.
the murder before he even left for work that morning. Friends of Ellen Robb did not hold back with their accusations. If it was murder, it was Raphael, they told police. There is no evidence that there had been physical abuse in the marriage, but according to those close to Ellen, Raphael did try to exert control over the relationship. Primarily, he did so with money. They had been unhappy for years. They slept in separate bedrooms. They had separate bank accounts, and they argued frequently. By Raphael's own admission, they had spoken about divorce so frequently over such a long period of time that he denied that it could possibly have been a trigger or motive for murder. They would fight. One of them would threaten divorce. Then, it never happened. This had been occurring since before their 12-year-old daughter was born. Indeed, Olivia's birth had been the single most significant factor keeping the couple together. According to Ellen's close friends and her brother Greg, things between the couple had been heating up leading to Christmas. Ellen had formally hired a divorce attorney who informed her that she was likely to receive 50 to 60% of her husband's assets in the split. She had also spoken with a realtor and agreed to rent a local 3-bedroom townhouse, perfect for her and Olivia. The move-in date was set for mid-January. Raphael, however, denied being aware of any of these plans. The professor's ex-wife described him as meek and quiet, but obsessed with money. Detectives also discovered that he had quite a bit of it, despite what they also learned was Ellen's shopping addiction. In addition to the house valued at close to $400,000, which the professor kept in his name, he had opened multiple foreign bank accounts, across which he held almost $2.3 million. As the investigation was underway, they had confiscated his American passport, but they could not also hold his Israeli one. Raphael Robb was a very real flight risk. If their suspicions were correct, and the economist had snapped and killed his wife, time could be running out to collect enough evidence to justify an arrest before he opted to leave the country. After a few days, Raphael was authorized to move back into his house with his daughter, and as investigators continued their work, he began to resume regular life. The grieving husband even attended Ellen's funeral, jumping into a place as a pallbearer unexpectedly, much to the shock and disgust of the mourners. After resettling at home, Raphael called both a glazier and a locksmith to address the damage done to his door and window. The men that came out for these tasks, however, were not tradesmen. They were undercover police officers. Struggling with only circumstantial evidence linking Raphael to the murder, investigators were keen to see if they could outsmart the game theorist, and maybe even catch him in an admission of guilt. The ruse was well planned. The undercover agent attempted to gain trust and build rapport with Raphael by admitting that he was not a glazier. He was on parole, he said, and was given the role as a favor from a friend. He couldn't fix the glass. His boss would do it. But he could offer advice about Raphael's legal predicament. The officer painted the lead investigator and the DA as cutthroat, officials that wouldn't play by the rules. If they had their sights set on Raphael, which he said they did, the professor would need to be equally aggressive to counter them. The story that a burglar killed his wife but did not steal anything wasn't going to fly, the undercover officer told him. He was going to have to, somehow, come up with a list of items that were stolen to support the story. Law enforcement believed that if the story was false, the professor would be in touch shortly with supposedly stolen items, and by extension, an indication of his guilt. Police waited to hear if Raphael completed the bait. They hoped that a return by the fake tradesman could also pick up where they left off and elicit more details from Raphael. Perhaps he would trip up. But the professor never took the bait. Whether he knew they were undercover officers is unclear. but no list of items ever emerged, and although he spoke casually and openly with the officers on more than one occasion, Raphael never altered his story. The results from the crime lab provided law enforcement the confidence they required to move forward with an arrest. There were no unknown fingerprints identified in the house, only Ellen's and her husband's. Blood samples taken all matched to Ellen. The forensic team could not establish a third-party presence through DNA sampling anywhere in the crime scene. Raphael's elusive burglar, they determined, had not been in the house. The professor was arrested and charged with first and third-degree murder, weapons possession, tampering with evidence, and giving a false report. If convicted, he faced life in prison without the possibility of parole. While held in custody without bond, Raphael hired a defense team composed of the state's most prestigious and successful criminal attorneys. They began to build a compelling case to establish reasonable doubt. There was no blood or related evidence found in Raphael's car, nor on any of his clothing. His office at the university was searched, and that also turned up nothing of evidentiary value. The drains were clean, and there were no signs of a cleanup. How plausible was it that he had beaten Ellen to death and left no trail? To his motive, his team stated simply that Raphael was not aware that Ellen had met with a divorce attorney. There was no paperwork, and they claimed he had no knowledge of her plans to move out the following month. And the alibi? Of course the owner of the fruit stand told the police that he had not seen him. Detectives lingering around the premises asking questions was bad for business. The owner had wished for the police to leave as quickly as possible, and so claimed he had not seen Raphael rob that day, when in fact, he almost certainly had the article. Much of the rest of his time had been accounted for. In addition to the doubts being laid out by the professor's team, the state was having issues bringing the pieces together. They knew that Raphael had owned 1 or 2 pairs of Timberland boots. He had been photographed in them years earlier and had verified they were his during his police interview. If he still owned them, he told investigators, they would be in his bedroom. But police could not locate the shoes. The footprint left by the killer did not match any pattern within law enforcement databases. So they determined that the boots must have been a foreign purchase that they had not yet recorded. But more alarmingly for their case, the size of the print in the kitchen did not align to their accused killer. They were too small to fit Raphael's standard size, 12 feet. Regardless of the inconsistencies, the prosecutors pushed on. They planned to present the testimony of an expert psychiatrist who was prepared to testify that the murder was a crime of passion. By extension, the murder could only have been committed by someone close to Ellen, and not, as the defense claimed, a complete stranger who broke into the house.
The defense says today they want to prevent expert testimony from psychiatrists and psychologists on the prosecution side from ever being admitted into court.
Killing was designed to obliterate her and her alone from the face of the earth. Obviously, the defense objects to that because he certainly has a motive to want to do that, and I certainly can see how they would consider that to be devastating.
Pre-trial discussions surrounding this witness and threats on both sides to repeatedly appeal any decisions that did not rule in their favor meant that the game theorist was facing years in custody before the case would even go to trial. It was at this stage that Raphael began to recalculate. Instead of fighting the charges, he opted for a plea deal. If the murder was a crime of passion and not planned down to the last detail, an offer of voluntary manslaughter from the state seemed appropriate. It was to this charge that Raphael Robb finally admitted guilt. It would carry a sentence of 10 to 20 years in prison. But for someone without any criminal history of any kind, the term was likely to be reduced further. In November 2007, Raphael took the stand to confess. He stated that it was not the money he would lose in the divorce, nor his wife's shopping addiction that had motivated him, but an argument over the care of their daughter, Olivia. As the exchange grew heated, Ellen had stood and pushed him, Raphael claimed. In the heat of the moment, he had grabbed an exercise bar meant to be installed for chin-ups from the living room. This bar was heavy, but circular and blunt. Then, he just started swinging, he said. Afterwards, the professor took off all of his clothing and boots in the bedroom, placed them in a bag to dispose of, and dressed for work. The confession was accepted. He was sentenced to a 10-year term, with the possibility of parole after just 5 years. The state prosecutors, approaching an election and uncertain of the strength of their case, believed they had made a sensible decision. Ellen's family, however, disagreed. They believed that the murder had been premeditated. Raphael Robb was both an intelligent and deceitful individual. His decisions were always calculated. It was unlikely that he had not planned the crime in advance. This was the argument put forward when the family filed a civil suit against Raphael, seeking damages for Olivia. It also offered an opportunity to have their day in court. At the civil trial, they argued that Raphael's confession was a lie, designed to fit the description of manslaughter, but inconsistent with the facts. To prove their theory, they pointed to a piece of evidence largely ignored by the original investigators. In the trunk of Raphael's car was a hazmat suit, brand new, still in its packaging. It was unclear why an economist would need a full-body suit designed to protect someone from hazardous materials. If he had one of these items, was it not possible that he had already made use of another one? If Raphael had put on one of these suits in the garage before entering the house, and then removed and disposed of it back in the garage afterwards, it would explain both the trail back to the garage and the lack of blood found everywhere else. But what about the murder weapon? Had he also armed himself in advance? In the garage, there was a rack on the wall that held a place for 8 tools. Between a shovel and a rake, there was one place on the rack with a tool missing. 5 years before her death, Ellen's brother Art had helped her to organize their garage. In that place had been a crowbar, Art stated, but after the murder, it was missing. The burden of proof in a civil trial is less than in a criminal court, but the case put forward arguing that Ellen's murder had been thoroughly planned and executed, not a sudden crime of passion, was compelling.
A jury has awarded more than $124 million to the daughter of a former Penn professor convicted of killing his wife, her mom.
It was far more than her father could ever pay, but an amount that provided a form of justice that she and her extended family had sought. After serving 5 years in prison, Raphael Robb was granted parole. 2 months later, Ellen's family was informed of the decision.
They followed the law, and the law seems pretty clear. I was prosecutor for 10 years, been a lawyer for a little while here, and it seems real clear to me that victims shall be afforded that opportunity to present evidence to that parole board, and in this case, that's
Ellen's brother Gary Gregory and others were incensed by the decision to release Raphael Robb after only 5 short years, and without being heard by the parole board. So they began lobbying. In conjunction with state representatives, they applied pressure on the board's decision, arranged a meeting of their own, and forced a reconsideration. In an unprecedented turn of events, months after being granted release, the professor's parole was rescinded.
Mr. Robb, is that this is the captain speaking, and your flight to freedom has been canceled. We want to make sure that our victims have the same right to the jurists, meaning the parole members. We want to make sure that the victims have the same right that these criminal fighters.
Raphael Robb served another 5 years in prison after his parole was revoked, completing his 10-year sentence. He was released from prison in January 2017.
He can't simply go back into society unfettered while the memory of my sister fades away.
After his release, he moved to a suburb of Pittsburgh. It is understood that Olivia Robb ended all contact with her father after his imprisonment. Gary Gregory, with the support of his family, successfully lobbied for new legislation making it a requirement for parole boards to consult with victims and their families before a convict is potentially released. The new legislation is called Ellen's Law. And that was the tragic case of Ellen Gregory Robb and her calculating and devious husband. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, nice case. Sucks to get married though. Poor woman.
On the 27th of September 2020, former ballet dancer Ashley Benefield shot and killed her husband in the Lakewood Ranch neighborhood of Manatee County, Florida. From that moment onwards, she has claimed that she did so in self-defense. She was in fear for her life. But many, including county investigators and prosecutors, doubted the young mother's claims, and with good reason. This would not be the first time that Ashley Benefield made shocking accusations regarding her husband. In all of her stories, there seem to be seeds of truth, a scattering of facts that can be supported, but spiraling out from them are almost unbelievable allegations.
Oh my god,
How much of Ashley Benefield's tales are true? Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Today's case is a recent one, and it's unlike any other we have covered so far. Some viewers will no doubt comfortably reach a conclusion based on what we know about this couple and their history. But there is no question that this case is a messy one. Let's take a look. Douglas Benefield started each day by sending a Bible verse to the most important women in his life, his teenage daughter Eva and his young wife Ashley. In the autumn of 2020, Doug and Ashley have been married for almost 4 years. Along with their 3-year-old daughter and Ashley's mother Alicia, the couple were planning a move from the Lakewood Ranch neighborhood in Florida to Ashley's home state of Maryland. In the days before the scheduled move, the family ate out. They joked around over text. They packed up boxes. Doug made runs out for last-minute supplies. Doug seemed to be having fun with all the chaos and excitement that can come with moving house. Ashley and mother Alicia organized the belongings in the house, while Doug cleared out his nearby apartment. A regular resident of South Carolina, Doug had rented the second home to be near to his wife and daughter while she stayed with her mother. When they landed in Maryland, however, they planned to be together. Doug was optimistic that this was the fresh start that his family needed. At just past 5:30 p.m. on September 27, 2020, 2 days before they were scheduled to move, Doug sent his last text message. It was to his wife. He was driving a rented U-Haul truck to the house filled with Ashley's belongings. In a joking and excited tone, the 58-year-old's typed, "Trucker on the way." Shortly after sending that text, Doug Benefield arrived with the moving truck at the Florida home. But he was not going to make it to Maryland. Less than an hour and a half later, a neighbor placed a call to 911. Ashley Benefield had run to his door, hysterical, asking for help. She carried one of her handguns. She had just shot her husband, she said. It was self-defense. Ashley's cries can be heard in the background of the emergency call.
With me now, quite upset. The weapon is here. We need the police before her mother and the little girl gets back from the park. I don't want him to find it. they were in an argument? I don't know. He came in, he was quite hysterical. He attacked her and she shot him. They've been having...
Responding officers and medical personnel found Doug on the floor of Ashley's bedroom. They attempted to save his life, but were unsuccessful. Inside the largely empty house, officers determined that multiple shots had been fired. They found a stray bullet on the floor and 2 more lodged in the wall. At least one of these 2 gunshots had struck Doug, while at least 1 bullet had found its way into a bathroom door. The initial assessment, which was later revised, was that Doug Benefield had been shot twice, once in the leg and once in his arm. This second gunshot, according to these early reports, moved through his arm to penetrate his chest. Police promptly obtained the weapon, a .45 caliber handgun, but also located 2 additional firearms in the house. Almost every item in the house had been packed into boxes, yet there was another gun in a small container in the kitchen pantry, as well as a .380 caliber that Ashley Benefield kept in her backpack. Both were loaded. What was notably missing was a second weapon used in the encounter, one potentially wielded by Doug, the alleged attacker. Had he been attacking Ashley as she claimed, there was no indication that he had been armed with a gun, knife, bat, or anything else. At the police station, Ashley was photographed with a scratch on her side. She also arguably showed redness and swelling under her left eye. There were no other scratches or bruises found on her person. If investigators at this early stage suspected that the claim of self-defense was bogus, they would not be offered any clarity by Ashley Benefield. The 28-year-old arrived at the Manatee County Police Department, escorted by her lawyer, who had reportedly managed to arrive at the house within minutes of the emergency call. With her attorney advising her to stay quiet, Ashley said nothing more. Back in 2015, Ashley Byers was a valued member of the Donald Trump presidential campaign. She also had a side gig as a swimsuit model. But her true passion was the ballet. A youth dancer when she had lived in Maryland, Ashley had dreams of establishing her own company. She conceived of a business endeavor that merged her love of dance with the values of inclusivity. A diverse group of dancers like her, bursting with potential, but for superficial reasons, had never had a big break. Ashley's dream company would take the ballet world by storm. These dreams began to form into a reality when, in the summer of 2016, she met a handsome and well-off widower at the Palm Beach home of the once presidential candidate, Ben Carson. Carson had ended his campaign, but was still active with donors. Doug Benefield ran in these circles. Upon their first meeting, 54-year-old Doug was said to have been captivated. His cousin called him starstruck by the 24-year-old dancer. It was reported that the couple bonded over, quote, their love of God and the Second Amendment.
Wow.
They couldn't stop talking. It was love at first sight. Their meeting that night spawned a whirlwind romance. Just 13 days later, the two were married. Doug Benefield was a veteran. He had been a pilot in the U.S. Navy. In 2016, he worked in the military technology industry, developing new tech for a variety of uses. He had also been successful in his other business endeavors, from restaurants to real estate. Doug promptly secured investment for the couple's ambitious new enterprise, Ashley's dream of a revolutionary ballet company, the American National Ballet. Doug would also spend as much of his own funds as possible to ensure that the initiative would take off. Meanwhile, at his home in South Carolina, Doug moved his new wife into the family home with his 15-year-old daughter, Eva. Home life from that point onwards grew rocky. A close friend of Eva's moved in shortly thereafter, further increasing the tensions in the household. friendly overtures made by Ashley towards the two teenage girls fell flat. Her attempts at bonding were overshadowed by what seemed like a ceaseless desire by the ballet dancer to always remain the primary focus of Doug's attention. Her behavior was not welcomed by Eva, who was experiencing a difficult period in her life. Only 9 months earlier, the young teen had returned home to find her mother, 56-year-old Renee Benefield, collapsed from a heart attack. Renee had passed away as the result of an undiagnosed heart condition. It was a shocking and devastating loss. Less than a year later, Doug and his new wife pushed forward with their big plans, developing the American National Ballet and getting pregnant. Dancers from all over the world obtained their U.S. work visas and flew into Charleston, prepared to make their name with the American National Ballet. Meanwhile, the company's two founders were having more and more problems. Apparently, Ashley began to grate on the nerves of her older husband. In spring 2017, after reading his stepdaughter's diary, Ashley discovered that her attempts to win over the teenager had failed miserably. Eva, as she read in the diary, deeply disliked her. This discovery prompted a confrontation with Doug. During the ensuing argument, Doug fired a gun at the ceiling of the family kitchen. He later told his cousin that he did so in frustration when his wife refused to stop talking. Doug also admitted to an incident where he threw a handgun towards a wall and punched his fist straight into it. Despite the growing frustrations, at least at first, Doug and Ashley carried on, presenting a united and happy front. Just a few days after Doug had fired a gun inside his own kitchen, the couple hosted a lavish wedding reception at a hotel in downtown Charleston. Looking at the smiling couple that night, no one in attendance would have suspected deep-seated tensions brewing under the surface of their marriage. The following July, Doug and Ashley learned they had been successful. Ashley was pregnant. But by August, she had packed up and left South Carolina. At first, Ashley told Doug that she was experiencing serious bouts of nausea due to her pregnancy and thought it was sensible to stay for a time with her mother in Florida. Several weeks later, however, Ashley secretly returned to their home in Charleston. She packed up many of her remaining belongings and left her husband a note. She wrote that she was scared for her life. She was scared for her unborn baby. She was leaving him and asked him not to contact her. Left without the company founder who had knowledge of the industry, the American National Ballet essentially crumbled. Doug placed the business under new leadership, which promptly made the decision to fire half of the dancers. From Florida, Ashley wrote that she was devastated, but she did not return to South Carolina. Instead, she began filing a series of complaints against her husband to law enforcement in Florida. During this period, the expecting mother began to believe, or at least to tell others, that Doug had been poisoning her and her unborn child. The nausea that she was experiencing, she said, was too extreme, even for pregnancy. Doug must have been putting something into her tea. She went to the police in Manatee County and reported the poisoning. She took with her a tea set, which had been sent to her from her husband as a birthday gift, wrapped in plastic, to the police station and requested testing for toxins. Ashley even made accusations that Renee Benefield had not in fact died of natural causes. Doug had poisoned his previous wife as well, she alleged. Renee's autopsy revealed a heart condition, and it showed that 75% of her arteries had been blocked at the time of her death. There was no indication of poisoning. Regardless, convinced that she had found him out, Ashley sent the pairs to a private lab for testing. Then, as her due date neared, she scheduled a C-section and secretly gave birth to a daughter. Doug Benefield was not informed of the birth. Ashley did not list his name as the father on the birth certificate. 6 months later, in 2018, the two began a fight for visitation rights. At the hearing in family court, Ashley testified that Doug Benefield was dangerous, that he had told her, essentially, that he was a serial killer who poisoned people.
He is a good killer because he's angry. He had insinuated that outside of the military that he had connections and that he could kill people, that he could make people disappear.
Why the fuck would you say that to anyone? For real.
Had murdered people, poisoned people, that he had gotten away with both, and
what a moron.
He could do it again and that nobody would ever find out and nobody could ever prove it.
Ashley went on to describe incidents that made her fearful of her husband. The encounter with the gun in the kitchen, as well as episodes of erratic driving when he was angry with her. Stacked upon these allegations were assertions that Doug had placed a tracker on her car and had been spotted by a neighbor watching her through her window at night. Ashley never accused Doug of becoming physical or violent towards her, only of scaring her. For the purposes of the legal hearing, this distinction was significant.
He started accusing me of not loving him and said that if I had loved him that I would have responded with a kissing emoji or a heart back.
Oh my god, what a
He started
moron.
accusing me of possibly having a relationship with somebody else. So this just proved that he loved me more than I loved him. I, of course, told him that, none of that was true, but he became more and more angry to walk away from me. And he was standing in the opening of the closet, and I was standing right on the outside of the closet, and he turned around and he punched a hole through the wall with his...
What Ashley did allege was that levels of heavy metals detected in her system and that of her daughter were proof that Doug had been poisoning them both.
And your daughter as well?
Yes.
And all those reports you've now been admitted into evidence, correct?
Yes.
And do those reports cause you concern based on your reading of them?
Yes.
And why?
Because they're not normal levels for either of us to have. They're very high levels of strange metals that are not necessarily common.
Okay. And when your daughter was born, she had these heavy metals in her system?
Yes, the meconium would have been dated back to the early weeks of gestation.
Okay. And they're the same heavy metals that you have in your system, correct?
Doug's attorney, Stephanie Murphy, questioned the validity of the toxicology results. The lab, Carlson Company, found dangerous levels of aluminum, cobalt, zinc, tin, and barium in her body.
Make sure the family has all the metals. 99%.
Metals in her system unambiguously to the judge at the hearing. They stated that Ashley Benefield had been intentionally and systematically poisoned. Countering these ostensibly clear results were medical records made throughout her pregnancy by Ashley's OBGYN and other professionals who found her to be in perfect health.
That you were sick from January 2017 forward, is that right?
I began displaying symptoms around that time, yeah.
Your low country OBGYN, can you recognize these?
Yes.
See, in the middle of that box, it says, denies lower GI symptoms. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Has regular, normal form bowel movements without pain or bleeding. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Denies new or acute muscle or bone pain. You see that?
Yes.
Denies skin or hair changes. Is that correct?
Yes, it says that.
And these are all statements that you made to your doctor on April 26, 2017. Is that correct?
That's what's recorded in these records, yes.
So are you saying is Low Country lying about this, or is this an accurate reflection of what you said to the doctor?
I believe it's fairly accurate. There are multiple times in the records that I have been reviewing over the past couple months where things aren't what I said they were, and they were written incorrectly.
In a strongly worded decision delivered by the family court judge, Ashley's claims against Doug were criticized. Judge Diana Moreland found absolutely no evidence to support Ashley's claim that she had been poisoned. She found that the testimony from Carlson Company had been completely discredited by the opposing expert.
She goes through with this lavish wedding. She goes on developing a ballet with her husband at that time, posing in magazines, portraying to everybody in the world that this is a very happy marriage, that we're going down, we're going to start this national ballet. All in a period of time, what we have is a household that is continuing on. It's Benefil being in the home, not making anyone alert. The medical records are devoid of any conversations between her and people that would have been providing protection, those being doctors, etc., indicating in the least that she has any type of poisoning that is appearing in her system, that she has been the victim of domestic violence. The actual presentation that she's had in the courtroom, she entered into the courtroom, the turning on of tears when she thinks it's appropriate. Not a single scintilla of credible evidence that Ms. Benefil had ever been poisoned or suffered from any illness of any poison.
The decision by the family court awarded Doug time sharing with his daughter. She was 6 months old when they would meet for the first time. When it came time to arrange the first visit, Ashley did something that no one was expecting. She happily agreed to the arrangement. She suggested that perhaps the three of them could spend time together as a family. Somehow, the couple began a process of reconciliation. Or did they? In late 2020, Ashley Benefield was arrested and charged with the second-degree murder of her husband. The state of Florida argued that Ashley was motivated to kill Doug to keep him out of her daughter's life. Whether real or imagined, the abuse that Ashley reported suffering had motivated her to fake a reconciliation with him. Once in 2018 after the family court decision, and then, as the state planned to argue, again in 2020 before she killed him. Ashley's first line of legal defense was a stand-your-ground theory. Under Florida law, Ashley could be deemed immune from prosecution if her use of deadly force was in self-defense and it occurred inside her home. The hearing took place in September 2023. Ashley had been released on bond and lived near to her mother and daughter in Florida. The former ballerina had never offered a formal statement to law enforcement about what she claimed happened inside her bedroom on the night Doug died. Fragments of Ashley's version of events began to trickle out as evidence was presented in court. Her attorney argued that she had tried to kick Doug into the house, but that he refused to go. When she tried to leave, he grabbed at her left wrist and blocked the door. It had been widely reported after her arrest that Ashley Benefield's self-defense claim would not hold water for one central reason. That Doug had been shot in the back. He appeared to be retreating, not attacking. However, when medical examiner Dr. Russ Vega took the stand to explain the injuries that Doug sustained, this reporting proved to be, at least in part, inaccurate. 4 gunshots had been fired. The fatal shot had struck Doug's chest. He also sustained a gunshot, however, to the back of the leg. A third bullet likely grazed his arm. The fourth missed entirely.
So the path that the bullet took was across his chest from right to left.
Okay.
It was also somewhat from front to back.
The order of the gunshots could not be medically determined. The state theorized that the location of the fatal shot to Doug's side could be explained by his attempt to turn and run from the loaded weapon. In this scenario, the shot to his leg came just afterward when he tried to run from the room. Ashley's attorney had a different theory. Doug was known to be quite athletic, a wrestler on his knee and a fan of CrossFit in later life. Doug was also, according to Ashley's attorney, trained in martial arts. The implication was that Doug himself had been the weapon. He was slightly to the side and in ready position to deliver some kind of karate move when he was shot. Could his leg then have been hit while performing a karate kick?
It have to be a unique kind of kick to, from the front, in a standing position, be able to expose the back of the leg. I suppose it is possible if the leg were raised high enough that the back of it were exposed to the person who's facing that individual.
Manatee County Sheriff Detective Justin Warren, who led the investigation, was questioned about Ashley's potential injuries. In particular, he was asked about the scratch on her side that was photographed on the night of the shooting. The detective's arrest affidavit stated that the scratch was already a day old. However, Ashley had told a witness, interviewed by law enforcement before her arrest, that the scratch was a result of Doug's progressively aggressive behavior towards her. That afternoon, he had intentionally and forcefully body-checked her with a moving box, she had stated, which had scratched her side.
They depict scratches on Miss Benefield on the evening of this incident.
They appear to.
Okay, and do the scratches appear fresh?
I don't think necessarily the one up under the sports bra appears to be.
What color are they? Are they pink?
Like I said, I'm not a color palette expert, but I would go with sure. It could be pink or red.
Okay, are any of them scabbed?
It's kind of hard to tell because they're so minute.
Do you see any scab?
No, I don't actually even see an open wound on this one that would scab open, so...
Forensic teams tested the t-shirt that Doug was wearing to determine if any gunshot residue was present. Assuming that Doug had been in close proximity to Ashley, as he would have been if posed, ready to perform a karate move of some kind, there should have been a stippling on his shirt, a burden left by the gunpowder that fired out of the gun along with the bullet. But the testing found none. The forensic expert testified that based on this, the gun was likely fired from a distance of over 3 feet away.
18 mii, mai mult decât la
somewhere around 3 feet.
Stica, whatever.